Hello everyone, this is Puja Mahajan, guest lecturer of English department from Sudasan Mahavidyalaya. Today I am going to give you a brief idea about Middle English period, which is part of second sem's syllabus. Now in your syllabus you have writers such as Langland and Chaucer. But before reading the writings of these authors, I think it is important for you to have a good understanding about the socio-political context of the period. So I'm going to give you the important characteristics of Middle English period as a whole, so that you can understand the literary production of the period in a better way. Now, Middle English period, as we know it, it begins in the year 1066 and it lasts till 1500. So from 11th century till 15th century is the duration of Middle English period. Now in 1066 what happens is the Duke of Normandy, that is William the Conqueror, he conquers the territory of England and he starts ruling over England in the name of William I. So with Norman conquest, there comes an end to the Anglo-Saxon period in England, that is the Old English period, and there emerges a new era, that is the Middle English period. Now this conquest of the Normans of England brought about a number of changes into the socio-political scenario of England. Let's have a look at these changes one by one. First, let's talk about the language. Now with the Norman conquest, there emerged a new usage of language, a new language in England, which is known as the Anglo-Norman language. Anglo-Norman language is a mixture of the Norman language of the invaders and the Anglo-Saxon language of the native. So this Anglo-Norman language became the oral language of the king and the nobility of the society. So the kings and the nobility, especially the elite class of the society, started speaking in this language. On the other hand, if we talk about the written language, it was Latin which took over. So Latin was the language of the authority. That means all the official records, all the important writings, all the religious scriptures for that matter, they started to be written in Latin. On the other hand, if we look at the common people of England, they were still speaking in different English dialects, such as Southwestern dialects, Southeastern dialects, East Midland dialects, and among all of this, East Midland dialect was the most popular, and later on we see that even Chaucer, he has taken up this dialect in order to write his literary pieces. So English as a language actually went through a lot of transformation during this whole Middle English period. Now this disparity in terms of languages also caused a lot of disparity in the society of England. As I said, Latin was the language of the authority. Now Latin was a language that was accessible only to a certain section of the society, especially the elite class, who could afford to learn and read and write in it. But for the common people, it was not accessible. And most of the population of England did not have the access to education, so they were mostly illiterate. So there was no question of being able to read and write the literary production or the religious scriptures of this time, which were written in Latin. Now, so there was a gap in the society between the educated and the uneducated. Now, there emerged an institution, that is the institution of church, it started becoming very powerful in Middle English period. Because with the emergence of Christianity as a dominant religion, the church became a very powerful institution. And not only the church started controlling and exercising its power over the common people, it also started doing the same to the monarchy. So there was a power relation, a power politics going on between the church and the monarchy. And if you look at the society of Middle English period, then the society was definitely hierarchical. So if you look at the top of the social ladder, you have kings, and then gradually you have nobles, you have the priests of the church and other professionals based on the profession. And if you look at the bottom of the ladder, bottom of the social ladder, you have slaves, you have peasants, or the lower classes. So the society was highly class-based and caste-based. So there was a class struggle that can be marked in the social scenario of Middle English period. And with this disparity, or with this gap between classes, there also emerged a lot of exploitation by the upper classes to the lower classes, a lot of corruption on part of the elite class, on part of the church. And all these things had a direct effect or direct influence on the literary production of the period. Say, for example, you get a direct reference of this particular incident of the church being corrupted in Langland's Pius the Plowman. So, more or less, this was the social scenario of England during Middle English period. When you are studying the literature of Middle English period, you also need to know about three particular political and social phenomena that took place at this time. The first being the 100 Years' War. Now, the 100 Years' War was a 116 years long war that took place between England and France. Yes, it lasted for 116 years, starting from 1337 and lasted till 1453. Now, this was not a continuous war. There were lots of gaps and fissures in between. But the consequences of this 100 Years' War was very, very far-fetched. Because of this war, England had to almost empty out its resources. So, by the end of the war, we can see that the resources of England were actually almost drained out, due to which the king had to impose a large amount of tax on the common people. So, there created a tension in the social scenario of England as a consequence of the 100 Years' War. The next phenomena was the Black Death. Black Death was a plague that took away almost 30 to 60% population of Europe. That means almost 30 to 60% of Europe was dead because of Black Death. And then the third phenomena being the Peasants' War or the Peasants' Revolt. It is also known as Tyler's Revolution or Tyler's Rebellion, because Tyler was the head of this rebellion. So as I said that the common people were asked to pay a lot of taxes to the king, but it was not possible for the peasants to pay such a high amount. And as a result, a group of peasants decided to rebel against the king. So that's how the Peasants' Revolt came into existence. But all these three phenomena affected not just the socio-political environment of England, but it also influenced the literary production of the period. So you have also a direct reference of the 100 Years' War and Black Death and Peasants' Revolt in Langland's Pius the Plowman. Now, this was brief introduction to what we see as social or political environment of England back then. Now let's have a look at the characteristics of the writings that we get to see in Middle English period. Now if we talk about the literature, the dominant mode of genre was poetry. Prose was also written, but the number was very few. Now when we are talking about poetry, then we have a lot of epics, we have a lot of romances which were written during this period. Epic, you know that it's a long narrative poem which usually narrates the adventures of a heroic figure who, with his bravery and with his greater human qualities and virtues, wins over the evil and saves his community, which he is a representative of. So we have a number of epics, and we also have romances. Now romance is also a literary genre which again talks about the chivalric presence of a knight who is an embodiment of lots of Christian virtues and values, who kind of teaches how to be a gentleman, how to be a good soldier, how to be a good soldier, an obedient soldier to the king, how to serve the king. Okay, and these chivalric experiences are sometimes they are amoral, they involve a love quest, but not necessarily so. So this way we have lots of epics, lots of romances in the literature of Middle English period. Then if we talk about the thematic approach of the literature of this time, then we see that it is mostly didactic in nature. So the purpose of Middle English literature was mostly to educate the people about virtues and Christian qualities. Since Christianity was the most dominant religion of this time, there was no single sector of the society which was not saturated with the ideals of Christianity. So it affected and influenced all parts of the society, even the literature. No wonder. So we also have miracle and morality plays, as you know, which talk about high moral virtues of Jesus Christ, say for example. Then if we look at the writers of the period, it's interesting to note that most of the writers of this period, they were anonymous. They chose not to put their sign in the original name of them into the manuscripts. Now there was no printing facility back then, so all we have are manuscripts, and most of them they are written by unknown authors. And the most of the authors of the time, we see that they belonged to London. London as a capital, it became a hub of literary production back then. It was a hub of trade. It was also a good place for learning. So we have universities such as Cambridge and Oxford established during this period. So Cambridge University was established in 1209 and Oxford in 1167. So London was definitely a good place of learning, and writers all over they started gathering in London in order to be acquainted with this literary atmosphere and in order to produce their literary production. Then we also see that there are certain other elements involved in the literature, such as supernatural elements. As it is, we know that the people of England, the common people back then, they used to believe in the existence of things such as heaven and hell. So eventually they also believed in the existence of demons, evil forces, in the existence of ghosts, in the existence of black magic. So that's how you have the use of supernatural elements in some of the literary production of the period. So it's no wonder that the society was highly superstitious, and the literature of the time also talked about it. There were also social satire written during this period, such as Langland's Piers the Plowman. So these are some of the main characteristics that I talked about. I hope it will help you to understand Chaucer and the writings of Chaucer and Langland later on. So yes, thank you.
This and other episodes of Radio EduPod's Radio for Learning are available on Listen to My Radio app at 6 p.m. from Monday to Friday and at 6 a.m. from Tuesday to Saturday. All episodes are available on Salesian TV YouTube channel. Share, like and subscribe Salesian TV, the ultimate learning resource channel.